Hey there, it's Dusty Thunder once again, and we have another Reddit story for you. This is actually from Best of Redditor Updates, so you know it's going to be good. And the title is 2 Tampons May Mean My Marriage is Over. Originally posted September 2nd, 2023. I, 29 female, have been with my husband, 30 male, for 7 years, married for 4. I've never had a reason to suspect he was unfaithful to me or even remotely dissatisfied with our marriage. He likes to joke that we're still living the honeymoon phase, nearly 5 years and 2 kids in. I wouldn't have questioned that, or him, were it not for a surprise I found in his car last month. When buckling our daughter into her car seat, I noticed something slotted between the cushions. I pulled it out and saw that it was a tampon. This wouldn't have been so unusual had I not had an IUD that has stopped my period for the past year, and I didn't even recognize the wrapper style. I brought it to my husband's attention, and he didn't seem to understand what it was, let alone why I was holding it, until I told him where I'd found it and why I was almost certain that it wasn't mine. He shrugged and said it probably belonged to his coworker, Fiona. It's not uncommon for my husband to carpool to lunch with his coworkers, and we're both fairly close to Fiona and her husband. So I figured it was entirely possible the tampon had slipped out of her purse whenever he had driven with them or offered her a ride. No big deal. I put it out of my mind until we had dinner with Fiona and her husband a couple of weeks later. I had sincerely wanted to believe my husband. I just couldn't get over the way it had been tucked in the seat and how my husband had seemed to not have any regard for it whatsoever. Maybe playing dumb? I don't know. I did something that I now feel kind of crazy for doing. I faked an emergency and asked Fiona if she had any tampons while we were out together. Aw, shit, she's trying to compare evidence. She handed me one almost identical to the tampon I found in our back seat, and I breathed a sigh of relief. So the tampon there was probably the same tampon here, and in all likelihood, there was an innocent explanation as to why it had been left in the back seat in the first place. Wouldn't hubby know that she doesn't use those anymore? I thought I'd seen the last of the out-of-place feminine hygiene products until I found another tampon this morning, this time in my sock drawer. I feel physically ill at the thought of my husband having an affair and even more nauseated at the thought of the woman might have left these tampons out for me to find. If it was my husband's coworker, why would she give herself away by offering me one the other night? In any other situation, I would want to talk to my husband about this, but I feel too sick and embarrassed to approach him with what I've found. What should I do? Relevant comments. I've had a period 30 years and have never put a tampon in a sock drawer. Trust your gut and get cameras. Neither have I. I've considered so many explanations for the tampons that wouldn't implicate my husband, but none of them make sense really. I'm terrified to set up a camera if it means confirming what I suspect right now. Question: has Fiona ever been over to your house and had time to plant a tampon? Response: she's been to our house many times and vice versa. To my knowledge, she wasn't over at any time in the past week. So if she planted that second tampon, she had to have found a window of time when I wasn't home. Anytime she and her husband visit, we all stay downstairs. And you'd have to really go out of your way to make it to our bedroom. For example, around our dogs, over the safety gate, past the other bedrooms. Not saying it's impossible, but definitely tricky to do in a quick bathroom break, I would guess. Question: how old are your kids? Could they have found a tampon and put it in your random place? Response: 2 and almost 4. Both have a mischievous streak, so I don't want to rule out the possibility of one of them moving stuff around, but I can't imagine how they'd get their hands on one, possibly 2 random tampons that I never bought. All right, we have an update. Before the update, what are your thoughts right now? Hubby, whenever she pulled it out of the car, and then asked Fiona and faked this emergency so that she could get the evidence, knew she didn't use them anymore, knew what she was doing, and decided to mess with her. That's what I think is happening. He decided to mess with her by just leaving this random one somewhere else. Update post September 20th, 2023, 18 days later. Contemplating every possible source of the 2 tampons has been my personal hell for the past few weeks, but I wanted to share an update. Shortly after posting on here, I told my sister what happened. The tampon in the back seat and the sock drawer, my husband's cluelessness, the tampon from Fiona, and all of the things I suspected but didn't want to believe. We covered tampons, save for the back seat one I had already discarded, and they were a match, just in different absorbencies. I hadn't left either in a place where my husband or daughters would have found them and moved them around. My daughters didn't know what they were or where they had come from. My sister was convinced it was Fiona, either effing my husband, effing with me, or both. Direct confrontation of either party still seemed like a bad idea, so she suggested inviting Fiona and her husband over for our Labor Day barbecue. Unfortunately, they already had plans. My sister and I agreed that it was too soon for cameras without any other evidence, so it was just a waiting game from there. Watching my husband for any changed behavior, there was none. Our house for any misplaced or foreign items, there were none. And even the girls for any new friends they might have met. My sister's husband was adamant on this last point, and partly why he was inclined to believe that the tampons were harmless. If anything had been happening in or around our home, he said, it would be nearly impossible to keep it from me and the girls, since my husband was the one taking them to and from daycare and most other activities during the week. I felt a good bit of consolation in that. It wasn't until my younger daughter, 2-year-old, came down with something last week that I felt any differently. I wanted to be the one home taking care of her, but my husband insisted that I stay at work while he stayed home with her. I was okay with that. My sister and her husband figured it was a good sign that he would take the time off at a moment's notice, and at that point we were all already beginning to put the tampon fiasco behind us. By the 3rd or 4th day, I was just happy to see a near-healthy child and a husband who was helping see her through it. Toward the end of that week, though, I came home to something strange. The toddler I had left that morning in an old PJ set was now dressed in a onesie that I'd never seen before, with a tiny clip in her hair. I can't say I have the sharpest memory, but I have a pretty good sense of what my kids wear on a day-to-day basis, and particularly what kind of clothes they wear. I had sworn off the full-length sleep suits with snaps across the front long before we had ever had our second. The long snaps are just a pain in the ass and a no-go for efficient diaper changes, in my opinion. Agreed. It's just not something I would dress her in, and my husband knows as much. He doesn't plan for or buy the girls' clothes, and he certainly doesn't accessorize them, so I was bewildered and kind of floored at the thought of someone around our sick child without my knowledge. I didn't think twice. I went straight to my husband to ask if anyone had been over to see him or the girls. He seemed confused, like before, and asked me why I would think that. It had just been him and the kids all day. I asked him again if someone had so much as stopped by to say hello, and he denied it. He told me to calm down. I might have leashed out and come forward with the accusation right then and there, but our older daughter was in the room, and she sensed something was up. In a calmer voice, I asked him a 3rd time if anyone had been around our children, and my husband swore that the girls hadn't been around anyone but him. He also denied buying new clothes or doing anyone's hair. With our daughter in the room and my emotions all over the place, I decided to leave it. I couldn't make sense of it then, and it hardly seems clearer now, after I've driven myself half crazy with explanations that aren't adding up. Oh my God! Before we get to the final update, thoughts now? If you said, hey, I feel like we need to get some security cameras inside and outside, you would be able to see if someone was coming in the entrances of your house. It wouldn't have to be inside if you didn't want it to be inside. You could just pitch the outside ones first. And if there was any opposition to it, that's a guilty sign, right? This also seems like it could be like a horror movie where the house is haunted and the house is like trying to bust up their marriage by doing this shit. What if they found out that their house was haunted after this? That would make a good story, I'm just saying. There may be a new story to fall asleep to coming our way. Final update, October 6th, 2023. After nearly losing my mind over a hair clip and a onesie, I realized I wasn't getting anywhere with the accusations and half-baked guesswork. I had gotten so absorbed in the paranoia and misery of my situation that I wasn't sleeping, eating, or caring for my kids the way I should have been, and I wasn't getting any answers. So I decided to pull the trigger on the hidden cameras and have them shipped to my sister's house, with my brother-in-law agreeing to help with the install and setup over at mine. Before the cameras were ever delivered, though, I got my long-awaited confirmation last week. A ring notification had alerted me to motion at the front door while I was at work, half expecting to see a delivery person, pet, or lawn care salesman for the 15th time. You can imagine my surprise when I saw a clip of a young woman leading my daughter into the house hand in hand with my husband and other daughter close behind them. The girls were supposed to be in daycare and my husband at work. The woman, as far as I knew, was living 2 states away with a court order keeping her there. Oh no. I immediately called my husband to ask him what the F this woman was doing in our house. He didn't answer, so I texted it to him. Even in his stupidity, he probably realized he had messed up by going through the front door, knew I had gotten the ring notification, and wanted to delay the inevitable. By the 5th or 6th subsequent call, though, he did pick up. The woman on the camera was my husband's sister. As I would come to find out later, she was likely the source of both tampons, the onesie, and the bow. She is also a registered sex offender and a recovering addict who spent the better part of her adolescence and young adulthood coercing the silence of another one of my husband's family members after she had molested them. I hadn't seen or heard from her in years, and from the way my husband talked to her, I didn't expect I ever would. But here she was in our house with our children. Suffice to say, I was livid. It wasn't an affair at all, and still somehow infinitely more disgusting knowing who it was and why all of this had been happening. Apparently, my sister-in-law, fresh off another stint in rehab, had wanted to reconnect and make amends with people she had hurt, and my husband was high on that list. My husband didn't want me to know, or worse, try and keep her family, our children, away from her. So they'd been meeting in secret, often at our house when I was at work. They would enter through the garage in my husband's car so the Ring camera at the front door wouldn't tip me off. She spent the night on the weekend I had been on a business trip and slept in our bed. She babysat our girls on a night that my husband told me he had dropped them off at his parents'. She bought the girls clothes and dressed my youngest in the onesie and bow that my husband had promised on his life I had dressed her in myself. My husband swore this was all in my head. The tampons, the onesie, the bow, and all the rest. He was perfectly content to watch me agonize for weeks over a woman he insisted didn't exist, shrugging off each progressively more unsettling discovery like it was news to him and telling me I was being irrational. He insinuated that I was experiencing postpartum depression 2 years after I had given birth. 4 years after I had told him that one of my biggest fears for motherhood was to suffer PPD like my mother had with me, to not be fully present for our babies, and be left with a world full of guilt and regret as they grow older. He told me I wasn't sleeping enough, that I missed the girls too much, that I needed to take a step back and reevaluate the state of my mental health. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because he was my husband and because no other versions of events made sense. Now, after a month of this mind F, I now have nothing to show for my trust but this pathetic situation and a lot of anger. Relevant comments, OP's response to calling the police and contacting a divorce attorney. Already on it, believe me, we're going scorched earth with this mother. I had to deliver the F on that one. It just made sense. Okay, OP's hubby is definitely an ASCON 1 here, and there we go. OP's husband is a definite ASCON 1 here. 2, not just gaslight, but mind his wife while putting his children in danger. He just lost his kids. What the was this guy thinking? What the He knew it was wrong. He knew it was wrong. Why else would he sneak her in? It's not just because he didn't want his wife to find out. It's because he knew it was wrong. And if it wasn't wrong, then he wouldn't have had to hide it in the first place here. This is so much worse than cheating. I wish we had found out that their house was haunted or some shit, because this is so much worse. Dude. Knowing what she spent time for, knowing that there's a restraining order keeping her away from your children, to willingly leave them alone with her means that you don't have to wait to burn in hell. We'll burn you right here. You don't get to see your kids anymore. You just sealed your fate here. And I don't know what would drive you to do something so stupid and to risk that, to risk the safety of your children because it's your sister and you trust and love her. It doesn't matter, man. It does not matter. The safety of your children comes before everything else. And you knew it was wrong. You knew what you were doing. That's why you tried to mind your wife and hide this for so long. This is unacceptable for any parent ever. And you will never see your kids again. Guess you get to go live with your sister now. What are you thinking, you dipshit? He let her watch the kids alone. She babysat the kids for like a weekend. He left her alone with them. You don't even know if something happened here, and I don't even know how you find out if something did happen. Like, kids are too young to tell you. If anyone ever put my kids in this kind of situation, we wouldn't need court. We wouldn't need due process. This is unacceptable. You don't get to do shit like this and be around kids ever again. So guess what, OP's husband, you not only have lost your kids now knowingly put kids in this position, you're probably not going to be around any kids now forever. Literal human shit. ASCON 1 doesn't do it justice. This is pure evil. Putting your kids in this kind of position and lying to your wife about it to the degree that you were trying to make her believe that she was just crazy, that she was just losing her shit. Rage. Just rage.